Welcome back to Magic Hour Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Taylor Page.
And I'm Claire. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
So, I feel like every time we do a solo episode series, we're like, how have we not done this yet? Like, we did the angel episode, connecting with your angels for episode 203 of this season. And we were like, how is this in our second season, the first time we're doing an episode on angelic connection? And that's how I feel about this week's episode, too. It's like, how is this? We're like, by this point, probably 60 episodes in or so. How is this our first time doing a deep dive on intuitive connection? I know that we've brushed up against it in other episodes, but it just feels really important to get into this topic. I was with Rachel Kelly. She was in my area and we got coffee, and she's my therapist and she's the guest from episode 211. And I was telling her this story about how my intuition saved my life. And she's like, have you not done a podcast episode on that yet? And I was like, oh, no, I haven't. And she's like, you need to share that on Magic Hour. I was like, you're right. And so it's inspiring, this episode, which is all about intuitive development, but also how listening to your intuition can literally save your life.
Yes, I know. It's so cute that we didn't even think to do this. And the angel episode, we're like, duh.
I know. I feel like I'm in my hummingbird energy of shimmering around to each spiritual practitioner, and I'm like, I'm learning so much from you and you and you, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is also my podcast and I have to share my own areas of expertise sometimes.
Yes, I mean, me personally, I'm always so interested in hearing your stories and your wisdom. So I'm so excited for this episode. And I know it's a big topic for our community because it can be a challenging thing to really hone in on your intuition. I know for me, it's been like a journey. And it's so cool to see in the last couple of years where it's grounding in this way, where I really can tell the like vibration of it versus, before it was like guessing, but now like I know.
That's so powerful. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what that shift has been in you. Like, what, if you could try to describe what it felt like when it was guesswork versus knowing.
I think before I grounded into the knowing of it, I didn't know what it was. So it was like sometimes maybe I was listening to it, and sometimes I was overwhelmed by like my fear and anxiety. But I think a moment would happen where I would have an intuitive hit and maybe not even know that's what it was and trust it. And then there was evidence of it afterwards where it was like, oh, I felt that that was wrong. And here is some evidence that it was wrong. And I think the trusting of it is how it's expanded. And I'm really seeing that lately where it's like, oh, I've ignored it in moments and brushed it aside. But because I've started to trust it, it's deepened into this grounded knowing. I'm in a situation right now where I have like a knowing about a situation and I'm not getting validated by other people in my life about it. And in the past, I think I would have been like, oh, I must be wrong. I must be wrong. But now I'm in a space where I'm like, no, you know what that feeling is. And you've trusted it before and it's proved right before. So like you can trust this whether or not it's getting validated, which is tough.
Yes. And that leads me to my definition of intuition. My definition of intuition is the sum of all of the times we've trusted ourselves. And so you giving that explanation falls perfectly within that definition.
Yeah, that's literally what it feels like for me. It's because I've trusted it in the past and it showed itself. I can trust it now. It's almost like a musical note, if that makes sense. Not that it is a musical note, but I feel music in places within me. And now I feel the intuition in a place within me where it's like, this is that knowing.
That's so cool. Like, in the same way music hits you in your heart, intuition hits that same deep resonant spot.
Yeah.
Oh, that's powerful. And it's so true about how difficult it can be when you don't have validation. Even as a professional reader in the space, sometimes I'll feel into something and I'll be like, this is what I'm getting about this situation or this relationship. And they're like, that's not my experience. Everything is great. And I'm like, okay, I can't like make up something that you want to hear. This is what I'm getting. And even in those moments, as an earlier on reader, I'd be so dysregulated by that disagreement and I'd like want to agree with them and make them feel good. But I'm like, let's start to unpack this. Or if you can't take the message, let's move on. And then maybe even months from then or a year from then, they'll circle back and be like, actually, this really was the case. And that is exactly what you're saying, just trusting what you're getting. We can't sugarcoat it. And this is something that I'll go into deeper because a lot of you guys wrote in with questions about self divination. And self divination requires radical trust with yourself and radical truth. I think so often with our self divination, we're like looking in all the wrong places. We're pulling tarot cards and looking for signs externally and looking up to the sky when in reality, self divination happens when we can get so real with ourselves and it all happens inward. It's like we can pull cards and things for support and to feel held, but like the true knowing comes from that deep relationship and that deep excavation inward. And I think so much of us run from that. And that's why we aren't getting accurate information with our self divination practices.
Yeah, I had a great experience with that exact thing with Rachel, who's also my therapist. She's amazing. Thank you for the referral, Taylor. But, we were discussing something and my fear was telling me a message about this situation. And I was like, I think it means this. And it was like a sad thing. I was making it equal. And she was like, okay, I want you to get very still and quiet and take a couple breaths and listen to the still, quiet voice inside you. Do you really think that's true? And I think that's like such a big part of it because underneath all the frantic worrying and stress and anxiety that we wonder, is this intuition? Is this right? Is this right? Is a deep knowing if we just chose to listen to it. But we're letting our worry pay attention to all the other fluttering messages, or our pain body is latching onto a story that we've told ourselves many more times that feels very comfortable. And we're like, this must be it. I must be so unlovable. That's for sure it. But it's like, if we really get quiet and still, we all know that we're lovable. Truly, we know that. And we get swept up in our sadness and our pain and our fears. So I think that was like such a huge shift for me. And now when I get caught in that, I really try to do that for myself of really get still and quiet. And underneath all of that, what is that deep, actual truth that I know that I'm just too sad and scared to face?
Yes. And I think that hits on so many important points. The first is that I was observing fearful thoughts yesterday in my kitchen, and I noticed that fear versus intuition, because I'm always trying to observe so I can report back. And like fear versus intuition, fear always has a subtext of what if. You can distinguish fear versus intuition because intuition is kind of just this knowing. Like Claire said, it hits you like in a deep way that maybe music hits you if you feel connected to music. Whereas fear is this subtext of what if this, what if that, what if this, what if that. And I think there's a subtle energetic current that delineates the two. And it goes to this idea of if you look at the ocean, the choppy waves on the top are those frenetic thoughts of what if this, what if that, what if this. But if you can sink lower beneath the waves to that dark, still water, that is where truth lies. And that is where the frenetic energy on the top, which is like the crown chakra in this case, isn't interfering with what the deep heart wisdom knows. But here's the twist is that it takes courage to go to those deep, dark waters. We feel so much more comfortable riding the waves and the choppiness, being distracted by the choppiness, being propelled by the choppiness. There's an element of shadow and fear and radical honesty and making peace with what our inner villain voice is trying to paint as these worst case scenarios that pull our puppet strings. All of that exists in the deep, dark waters. The deep, dark waters are where the shadow lives, but it's also where magic and power and truth lives. And when we are running from shadow and healing and truths that we are not ready to face, we can never get accurate, intuitive information for ourselves.
Wow, that was so well said. And I love that analogy about the water. I feel like that's so, so true. And it is such a funny contradiction when you think of it like that, because that choppy water is dangerous ground. You're going to get tossed around in that choppy water. But the depths where it's still is actually a safer, more grounded place to be. But it does ask you to confront what is really happening. And I think a big lesson I've been facing with that too is, and I'm sure many of us can agree to this, like I've spent a lot of time maybe hiding from or turning away from some of those deeper truths, not wanting to face some of those shadows. And once I've faced them, it's been a pretty quick turnaround. Like it hasn't been this like, I don't know what I thought was going to happen, that if I faced them, they would drown me, or that if I faced them, they would envelop me and consume me. But it's like turning the lights on when you think there's a monster in the room. And then you see, oh, it wasn't a monster. It was a tiny mouse or my lamp that I thought looked like a human face that I told myself was, maybe I'm off track with that analogy.
No, I get it.
Just meaning that like when we actually shine our awareness light on it and face it, it is not the monster that we've decided it is. And pretty quickly, the choice to face it is all it needed to diffuse. And so I think we've built it into this like monster or something that we don't want to look at. And it's actually like once we look at it, we're in such a better place. So if I can encourage you to have the bravery to face those things, you are so much stronger than they are, and it won't be as bad as you're thinking it's going to be.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest lessons. Well, first of all, it's like when you get the message, the messenger can stop. And one of the biggest things I've learned too is that bullies overall, but especially this type of bullying, is all talk. It's literally all talk. Like when I got out of my narcissistic abuse relationship, I realized like this is all talk. It's all threat and innuendo, and our brains are taking that up and doing everything, doing the work for it. But like in reality, I think the fear of things are always way greater than the actual manifestation of what that could be. And we're so powerful. But going back to that wave analogy, the choppy water on the top, it's just so funny to think about people in the wellness or spirituality industry who don't go to the deep waters, who are just like love and lighting, getting smacked by waves. And it's like building like little rafts made of crystals and getting thrown around by the waters. It's like, no, like there's no way to stay on the top and get accurate intuitive information, especially when it comes to self-divination. We have to have the bravery. That's why one of the most common things I see are people like, I don't believe I have angels. And I'm like, okay, talk to me about that. Why is that? And they're like, I asked if this person was my soulmate to send me a butterfly, and then they did, and he wasn't my soulmate. And that is so common. I know I've addressed this a little bit on other episodes, but it's like seeing a butterfly outside of yourself isn't where you get the information if that person is your soulmate. It's just not. That's another way of outsourcing your power. It's time for you to get into those deeper, darker, still waters and ask, why do I feel the need to know right now? Where do I feel afraid? That's the true, juicy, intuitive information. That's going to be the key to the shackles that keep you in those choppy waters, is like starting to get curious about those deeper truths, because it's like we make things about other people. And I think self divination, the word self, it's like it's always reflecting back something about us. And we make it about these teachers outside of ourselves in the forms of relationships or jobs or living situations or whatever. But then we ask divination questions about them, when in reality, they're all catalysts for our personal development. And we're either asking the wrong questions or looking in the wrong places and feeling really discouraged and not supported, when in reality, it's like you are so supported. And when you look back in 5 years, you'll be so happy that relationship didn't work out or whatever. But we're looking at the question from the consciousness that is part of what needs to be healed, when the consciousness of what is already healed and part of the solution is what's guiding us.
Yes. I feel like you've talked about this in the past and it's really resonated with me too, where like, what do signs mean? And how do I trust synchronicities? And I think what we'll do is we'll look to the butterfly and be like, okay, that's confirmation. That's a yes. But I think the thing you've highlighted is the butterfly is an invitation for you to ask your inner knowing, is this a yes? And the fact that you needed to ask for a sign about whether this person was for you to me kind of points to the fact that somewhere inside it's not quite feeling like a match. Otherwise, you wouldn't need a sign because you just feel aligned with this person. But because it wasn't in alignment, the last relationship I had, oh my God, the amount of times I went to my pendulum and the amount of times I went to my cards, and sometimes it validated yes, and sometimes it validated no. And I felt detached in that way where I was like, oh, my pendulum doesn't work. It's not helping me. But I think it's more about an invitation to check in. Does this card actually feel true? This card is saying it's a yes. Does that feel true though? Or I had the thought that this person's for me and I saw the numbers 222, but does it really feel like this person's for me deep down? It's more of an invitation to check in with your actual divining tool, you, versus just thinking like a synchronicity proves X, because I think then that can be our brain putting on top of it what we want. We want it to be a yes. So we saw the numbers and we're like, it's a yes. But that's not necessarily what you know inside.
Yes, it's projecting our attachment to outcome onto something outside of ourselves. And so, if there's one takeaway you guys get from this episode, is that self divination requires an inward deep journey, not looking outside. Whereas doing divination for people outside of yourself, okay, yeah, then you can start to connect outside and to other people's energy. But it's like there's this self divination. How you can tell when you're in attachment to outcomes is when you keep pulling cards until you get the one that you want. When you keep looking around for like signs to see the one that you want. It's like there's this energy of forcing and grasping and convincing that is telling you there's deeper intuitive information underneath this. It's funny because I'm so behind on this, but I just watched this documentary called Bad Vegan. And it's about this lady who had this raw food restaurant in New York City. And she was like, killing it and her business was going well and she was so ahead of her time. And then she meets this guy who she met on Words with Friends, like what the heck. And he was controlling and it was all like a scheme. He would get money from her business and then he'd gamble it away. And it became this interesting dynamic. I won't spoil the documentary for you guys, but that to me was a perfect example of her heart the whole time being like, this guy isn't right. This guy isn't for us, and her head being like, give me a sign that he's for me. Give me a sign that he's for me. And so I think like true self divination and true connection comes from noticing when we are playing judge and jury in our head over the truth of our heart. And usually that frantic need to pull multiple cards or check in with the pendulum, and we've all been there, that is showing that you're actually in a crown chakra block and you're not connected to your heart, which is where the truth lies. So who are we debating when we play judge and jury in our head? It's our intuition and our higher self. And then we're like, I'm not supported. But it's like, no, you're so supported. Your angels and guides just weren't letting you go down with the ship of whatever outcome your ego was attached to.
So true. And when we're on the other side of it, we look back and it's easy to see, like with this last situation I was in with this guy, it's like now I really see how I just was wanting an outcome that I knew in my heart was not it. And then that's also such helpful, intuitive understanding, right? It's almost like the opposite of what we were talking about at the beginning of like intuition is the sum of all the times that I've trusted myself, and the sum of all the times I haven't helps me to trust myself in the future. That has helped me to be like, you ignored that. You knew, but you ignored it. So next time you feel yourself ignoring it, it will hit me again in a new, deeper way because I'm like, oh, here's that familiar ignoring it.
Yes. And I think, just like you said, ignoring it doesn't change the outcome, it prolongs the lesson. And that's where like Pluto comes in as a teacher. And as such an eighth house scorpionic person, I've had to learn Pluto's lessons really intensely. And one of the main lessons is how bad does it have to get before you let go? And I think that that is where self-sacrifice comes in. And my definition of self-sacrifice is the purposeful ignoring of intuition. It's like your intuition is there giving little warning bells saying this is not right, this is not authentic, this is not powerful, this is not your highest path. And the more we play judge and jury over it, the more we ignore it, the more we self-sacrifice. And that's when we're out of alignment with everything, because our whole purpose of being here is to explore this slice of consciousness as authentically and joyfully and lovingly as possible. And when we self sacrifice, we've lost sight of that.
That's such a great way to put it.
Let's get into some of the stories now where I want to break down some intuitive experiences that I've had. And I want to start from like low stakes and then get up to a time where literally listening to my intuition saved my life. So this first story it's first of all ironic because this first story is the only time in these stories that I didn't listen. And it's when I was more developed. The other two are like before I even started. So that's kind of funny and ironic. But this first story, I almost felt like my angels were giving me such a clear cut example of getting an intuitive message and not listening to it for teaching purposes. Like it felt very edifying. In this first story, it was 4th of July and I had some out of town relatives that were coming and I was going to take them out on the boat and Ari was out of town. And of course on 4th of July, like everyone on the lake is on the boat and there's like hundreds of boats and we just got a new boat and I didn't know how to drive it. And I was like, excuse me, whoa. It was so scary. So earlier that day, I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure the boat's getting ready. And Ari had just gotten me these really nice new sunglasses and they were on my head. And I clearly got the message, put your sunglasses on the table. That was the message. And I knew, put them on the table before I go out onto the boat. And I was like, oh, that's okay. There I am, ignoring and debating that clear intuitive information, which by the way, when it came in, it was in second person, put your glasses on the boat, which is how a lot of intuitive information comes in that second person because they're speaking to us. Secondly, it didn't feel fearful. I wasn't like, oh my God, my glasses could fall in the water and then this could happen and then that could happen. It was solution oriented and it was practical. Put your glasses on the table. So I was like, oh, then I immediately start debating it. I was like, actually, it's fine. They're secure on my head because I was going to like unzip all the flaps and just air out the boat and get it ready. I was like, no, that's totally fine. Like, I'll be careful and I'll just, while I'm unzipping everything, I'll put them down in the boat and they won't fall. So I walk down to the boat. I go to unzip the first flap and a wasp is on the thing and it flies towards me and I recoil back and my sunglasses shoot off of my head, off of the dock and plunk into the water. And I was like, that is the most clear cut example I could ever have of why did I not listen to my intuition? And my angels were kind of laughing and they were like, we told you. And so I was like, okay, that's a perfect example that sometimes our angels and guides see things down the path that we don't see. My conscious brain would have never been like, a wasp is coming. And that's also another sort of low stakes example of how intuition works. We might get the information that something is for us or not, and we might not know why yet. And sometimes I feel like in movies and film, when intuition comes through, and sometimes this can happen too, where you get such startling clarity about details that are to come. Like that can happen. But more commonly, it's like the little morsel of truth I'm giving you right now is to leave your glasses on the table. The little morsel of truth I'm giving you right now is that this isn't the relationship for you. But instead, we are like, no, no, no. We'll convince ourselves, we'll talk ourselves out of the threat that we can see, but then I didn't see the wasp. We might not see something that this person is going to get into later down the road. It's like we get that clear knowing, and it's almost like time stands still and we get that message and that knowing. And if we don't listen to it, there might be things that we could not have seen that then make it clear. And so a lot of intuitive information is clear in retrospect.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a big piece on a bigger scale of everything. Like we think we know, we think we have all the information. So we think this is right for me, but we just don't know everything that's coming around the corner. So we might be with a person and think, okay, yeah, this person is right for me. But we don't know that there's someone else way more in alignment who's around the corner. And we're choosing something that isn't in alignment because we think we have all the information. And I think that's just like such a big piece of it. Understanding we don't know everything is huge in like really being in touch with yourself. It's like holding on to that control of, I know everything, so I know this is the next right step, gets us all tangled up.
So true. So I want to move on to now like a little bit higher of a stakes situation. So I went to Cal State Northridge for college. And it's funny because actually Ari went there too. And we were both I was a business minor and he was a business major, but he was like, I would have known if I saw you. But I was like, probably not. I was weird at that time.
You guys were there at the same time?
Yeah, I know. It's like that red string theory. Like eventually we were going to meet.
I love that.
Yeah, we were there at the same time, but I think both in relationships at that time.
That's such a perfect example too of like divine timing. It's like sometimes we think this could be me. Why isn't this happening for me right now? And like maybe the other person isn't done cooking yet. They're on their journey, you're on yours. Like the timing is a big factor. So like trusting that and not trying to force is huge.
Yes. And that actually, to just go a different direction really quickly, there was a reading I had with a long term client who was looking for a new job. And the message was the job hasn't been created yet. It's not going to be on the market for another month or two. It's not even going to be an opening. So imagine you're doing self divination and you get this message and it's just like the timing isn't right. But then you're like, no, no, no. And then you try to force another job and then you go down another path. And then you're like, I don't know what to do. So I sign up for grad school. It's like we just start trying to make things happen because we're so uncomfortable with the unknown. But sometimes that is the message, is like, it's going to come when it does. And that can be so hard for us. And that has happened too with like relationship readings where I'm like, hey, just so you know, the person that you want to be with isn't the man that you need him to be yet. He's like going through a lesson right now that's going to prepare him to be who you need him to be. So it's very complicated, but we get so attached to timings and outcomes and stories that it's hard sometimes to find the spaciousness to let life breathe a little bit.
Yeah, things take time. And just because we think right now is the right time, we don't know. So maybe the timing right now is not the right time.
Yeah, exactly. There might be a wasp on the zipper, and I wish I would have listened. I was so sad when I lost the sunglasses. I dove for them and I like skinned my knees, and I was like, no. So the second one, fast forward, I had an economics class at Cal State Northridge, and I had to park in this parking garage. And on the best of days, I didn't like this parking garage. It was like, I don't know, something about me just feels trapped sometimes in parking garages. They're dingy. I just don't like the vibes overall. But I would park in this parking garage because it was the closest to that building that the class was in. And Cal State Northridge is like a big campus. I assume most colleges are. And so I was in this parking garage. I park there every day. And I just got this clear message: don't park here today. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to listen to that one. And this is a time that it was like before I was really on this path. This was when I was still acting. I think this would probably be around like 2010 or something like that, I think. So I parked on the street. I go to my econ class. We're learning. Then it turns out there was a bomb threat in that parking garage, and everybody in my class got trapped and couldn't get to their car, and the police had to come and go to that parking garage, and I was on the other side because I listened to my intuition. I just drove home.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane. Wow. It's not insane. It's intuition, but wow.
Yeah, I know. So that's where the stakes start to get a little higher. And I think it was just a threat. Like, obviously, the parking garage didn't like explode, but I would have been trapped somewhere. And then I'm pretty sure I had to get to work and all of this stuff. And so my car was just, I just went. So that was like another thing. Well, it didn't come in, hey, a bomb threat is going to happen, so get out. And I think that's how a lot of people think about intuition. But the reason trust is so important is because it's never a full picture. It's like what we're meant to do now. And we have to trust that. And when we have a bad feeling about someone, or we just feel like we should leave, or we have a good feeling, wow, this person's probably going to come to mean a lot to me in my life. We don't have all the information, but we're just trusting what is coming up for us now. And so for that, it wasn't like something's going to happen, something bad, you're going to crash your car. It was just like, don't park here today. And I was like, copy that.
That's so great. That's so great. I've definitely had that too. Like I had the opposite where I was at Griffith Park, which is this beautiful area to hike here in LA. And it was really crowded and all the parking spots were taken, but there was like this strip in the middle that people had been parking in. So I was like, okay, maybe I can park there. And then as I'd already parked and gotten out and someone moved from the regular spot, and my intuition was like, take that spot. And I was like, it's fine. And then hours later, they started ticketing all those cars. And I thankfully saw it happening. And so I got out, but then I had to park blocks away and walk all the way back up. And I definitely had that thought where I was like, You had the information. You knew what you needed to do and you just brushed it aside. So I was like, stop doing that.
And that's like part of the process of learning to trust ourselves is like that information that it does become more clear in retrospect. And it's like, why didn't I listen? And that's why I always say, trust your knowing the first time. It makes life so much easier.
Yeah.
That's true life on easy mode. It's just trusting your intuition the first time. Okay, so this is like the story that full on saved my life with intuition. And this was back in that same kind of college time period. And something to note about my psyche during that college time period was this is when I was the most afraid of my intuition. I was very afraid in childhood. If you haven't heard my story, listen to episode 101. But I even tell the story in college about how my castmate died. And then I channeled her on the stage when I took over her part and she whispered some of the lines in my ear that I forgot. There was a lot of psychic paranormal phenomena around my college years because I feel like they were priming me for the path that I was going on with angels and amethyst and everything like that. But this was a time period where I would have night terrors and I would be so afraid because I didn't understand the energy I was sensing. And I was coming from this small town of Ojai, where when I was growing up, there were 8,000 people in our town. And then my college alone had 40,000 people. And I was very overwhelmed by all of the energy. And it was just a really interesting mix of fear and intuition and repression. And it was just a really interesting moment for me. So before I get into the life or death story, I want to actually interject this story because it's reminding me, and it's actually in chronological order. So I was in a 2.5 year relationship in college. I think it was my first boyfriend, my first love, like my first everything. He meant the world to me. And it just didn't work out. We were young and he was not my match. And also, I wasn't the best to him. It's like I didn't know how to be a partner. I was 18. Like I didn't know what was going on. And I had my own healing and growth to do. I was a kid. So he and I sort of started drifting apart and we decided to go on a break where we were still together. So a break isn't exactly the right word, more like take space. So I went home to Ojai for a couple weeks and he was in LA. And I was like, okay, for a couple weeks, he'll do his thing in LA. I'll be home in Ojai and then we'll come back together and see. But we were still very much together. And again, in a long-term committed relationship. So when I was home in Ojai at 3 a.m. for 3 nights in a row, I had a reoccurring dream, nightmare, where I would walk through this graveyard. And through the graveyard, just got this eerie feeling until I made my way to this mansion. And in the back of the mansion was my ex, at the time, my boyfriend, having sex with this redheaded girl in a pool. And it kept waking me up every night at 3 a.m. So on the third night, I called him at 3 a.m. and I just said, you hooked up with a redheaded girl in a pool. And he said, who the F told you? And that's when I was like, I'm a witch. I had like a rage blackout. I don't know what I said to him, but it was a really bad situation. And I'm like a Scorpio through and through. And I've worked really hard to contain my big emotions. But being cheated on by your first love is a crazy experience for such a deep feeler, much less for anyone. And so I lost it on him. I couldn't even really be in the awe of that mystical experience in that moment because I was so gutted. I was heartbroken. I remember watching Matilda. I don't know if you remember that movie, but I rode my bike to Starbucks at 5 a.m. I think I talked to him till 5 a.m. Rode my little bike to Starbucks, which my neighborhood was not close to Starbucks. I had to like get off and like walk up these big hills. Like I like couldn't. And then I got coffee. I don't even drink coffee. And then I rode my bike home and I just watched Matilda. And the rest of my family was home. And I was screaming at the top of my lungs at 3 a.m. on the phone. And they were all just like, blah, 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 pretending I was okay. Yeah, so that was like a really interesting experience because it goes into that message. And I wanted to share it because of the dream element of it. Because a lot of us, our intuition comes through dreams. And I think how you can know that you're having an intuitive, mystical dreaming experience and not just your brain working through memories and processes types of experience is that you wake up with a deep feeling because intuitive information always comes with a feeling. It can be urgent, it can be loving, it can be grounding, it can be regulating, it can spur you to action, but it always comes with a feeling. It can be peace, it can be truth. it's never fear or anxiety, even though sometimes the message can then trigger what your ego has to say about what that might mean, which can trigger anxiety. But when it actually comes through, it's never in a fearful way. And all of these examples, it's just like showing things of what needs to happen or what did happen. And so the feeling of that dream is like, oh, I need to know something. It's not like you're going to break up and be heartbroken and have the worst time. That's never how intuition is. That's more of that what if energy. So this dream really left me in this kind of unsettled place where I was like, I know there's truth that I'm not seeing. And it falls back into that idea of you'll never miss a message that's meant for you. I had to have this dream 3 nights in a row. And then I finally had to call him and confront him about this. That was like a really powerful mystical experience. And so, yeah, if you wake up and you're like, oh, I feel unfinished business with that dream. I want to like think about it and process it and go deeper into it. That shows that there might be some intuitive information with you for that dream. And that's very much how like past loved one visitations are with dreams too. They're simple. It's like dreams that have 6 different location changes and all this different stuff. That's usually like your brain working stuff out in its actual biological function at the end of the night. Whereas dreams that kind of have one main message, location, theme, or feeling, that's more in the vein of this intuitive type of dream. And this just kept coming back to like him in the pool, me walking through a graveyard, then him in the pool. It just kept sitting with me. So it can also be like, oh my gosh, I dreamt that my best friend passed away. Is that going to happen? And those kind of dreams can happen so often, but it's like, there's the dream world is so symbolic. So it's like maybe a version of herself or a version of your friendship is dying away. Very rarely is it like, yes, that's going to happen. And even in our dream episode with Dr. Michael Lennox, which is episode 111, we talk about that a lot on that episode. So if you're interested in dream stuff, go back there. There's intuitive information, but it very rarely is the dream world literal. But this was just an interesting instance where it was.
Yeah, so wild that happened. And full circle, the redhead was me. Just kidding. It definitely wasn't me.
Could you imagine an actress in LA?
It wasn't me.
Okay, I believe you.
I swear. I wasn't in LA at that time. I was in New York.
Honestly, at this point, I'd be like, that's fine.
But yeah, I mean, I think dreams can be so tricky too. Cause like we've all had those dreams where we like dreamt that we were like in a fight with someone and woke up and we have that feeling where we're like, I feel angry with you, but there's no reason to be angry. But I do feel like there's usually an underlying message or subconscious experience that you're having that the dream is representing. Maybe you're feeling distant from this person or you have fears about losing them, et cetera, et cetera. Your experience reminded me the last 2 people I've been in relationship with, and I don't really remember this happening with the others, but I had reoccurring dreams at the beginning of my relationship with both of them. And they were different, but I felt like now looking back, I see how they were a representation of the reason that it would fall apart. So like with the first guy, I had these reoccurring dreams where I wasn't attracted to him anymore. And it was right in the beginning. And in the dream, he was old or like not attractive to me. And I remember thinking like, what? I thought I was into this guy. This is him? Oh no. I thought I was like really excited about this guy. And then I would wake up and I was like, no, I am. Here he is. He's great. But later in our relationship, I did lose some of my physical attraction for him. And I had a deep emotional attraction to him, but that other piece of it fell away. And then with my most recent relationship, I had dreams in the beginning reoccurring. They were different, but where we were in like a crisis situation and he wasn't okay. And the most visceral one I had was his throat had literally been slit open, not to the point where he was dead. It was like a shallow cut. And he's like a very large man. He's 6'3", but he had been cut on the throat and was bleeding. And I was carrying him in my arms and like calling for help. And, you know, this man, when I met him, was in a moment of crisis in his life. And now looking back on it, I see where I was like, oh, like energetically, I was holding him in this moment where he was like emotionally not okay. And eventually that was a big reason why we couldn't continue because he just had work to do and needed to unravel the situation he was in. But so it's been interesting looking back on those. And I was like, oh, my subconscious deeply knew what I was facing that I couldn't fully see in the moment.
Yes. Oh my God. That is, especially knowing what I know about that situation. Also, like major communication problems, major not speaking his truth, major not being honest with himself. So the throat being like shallowly cut, not enough to die, but uncomfortable and constantly losing blood. Wow. That is so crazy.
And I'd only have them when I was with him when we were like sleeping in bed together. Like when we weren't together because we were long distance, I didn't have the dreams. But it was like when I was with his energy, I would have these violent, fearful, tragic dreams.
That is so interesting and such a good example. I mean, yeah, our intuition knows. And I think for people who are not constantly developing or like sitting in client sessions every day, dreams are such a powerful place for self divination because it's opening the lid on deeper truths that we aren't maybe consciously ready to look at yet. And so it's really interesting because I kept having reoccurring dreams that Ari was cheating on me. And I think most people would be like, oh my God, like that means that he's cheating on me and I need to check his phone. But I knew without a shadow of doubt that he's not cheating on me. But I like sat with it, like, what's the core emotion of the cheating? And I realized like it was during a time period where Ari was working so hard and had so much stress at work that I felt a little disconnected from him because when he got home, he was like a shell. And then I would be like a shell. We were just disconnected. And the cheating was showing me, oh, like the work is taking the spot in his life that I want to be. And I feel cheated of his time and energy in some way. And so it's like, it's not always literal. For example, your first ex wasn't this old, disgusting man, but it shows us like deeper things that are very symbolic and it speaks the language that intuition speaks. It's symbolic, it's feeling, it's emotional, it's knowing. I just think dreams are so important.
Yeah, and I think that distinction is so important about how it's more about the feeling that's evoked than the facts of the situation in the dream. The facts of the situation or the circumstances in the dream, like this man did not bleed out in my arms, but maybe emotionally, I was feeling that I needed to carry what he was going through and that he wasn't able to carry himself, for instance. I think honing in on what is this feeling that was evoked. You know, I've talked about my reoccurring dreams of feeling not chosen. And I know now that that's really what it's representing, this situation that calls forth a feeling of me not being chosen, not that it's about any one specific dream. And so when we can hone in on the specific mood or feeling that gets called forth, it doesn't mean when you dream about death that someone's died or that you are going to die. But what that evokes is probably pointing to an energetic death that you might be experiencing with someone or in your life.
Exactly. Like in my dream when I was walking through the graveyard, it's like our relationship was dying. A version of me that had innocence was dying. It's so powerful. And again, I cannot recommend episode 111 enough with Michael Lennox. It is so good.
It's amazing.
I know. He's going to come over sometime in the summer. My aunt and I are probably going to go on the boat. We've done it before and he's such a delight.
He is just joy encapsulated in a human being. Like, what a spark of joy and light. I adore him.
I know, me too. And the way he talks about astrology, I'm just like, I love him so much. So now for, as promised, the grand finale story. This was probably a year after that dream situation. And it was storming really badly in Southern California. And my family lives on a plot of land that had 21 oak trees on it. And I loved the oak trees so much. I didn't really love living in Northridge. If you guys aren't familiar with Northridge, it's just a place that coming from Ojai, which is like trees and nature and family and like my little comfort bubble. It's very real world moving to Northridge. And so I would constantly be back home. Like I would go to my classes at Cal State Northridge. I'd go right back to being home, especially when my ex-boyfriend and I broke up. I was like, I'm going back to Ojai, like peace out. So my parents had a really long driveway and their cars would be parked at this kind of opening at the top. And then there was this long winding driveway. And I would always park to the side. The driveway had kind of a space where there was an oak tree. And then I'd park my car to the side. And then both of my parents could still get out if I parked there. So I parked in my usual spot that I always park when I went home. And I was sitting in the car, like scrolling on my phone a little bit before I was going into the house, checking my texts and stuff. And I just got this message, move your car to the street. And who parks on the street when they're visiting their home, like their childhood home, especially when your parents have such a big driveway and area for parking? Like, why would I ever back down this long, windy driveway that I have to walk back up and park on the street? But something about that just, I listened. And looking back, it's so interesting that I did because, again, it's like before I really came to terms with this whole path that I'm on. And I was very afraid of all of this type of stuff. So I back down this long, winding driveway. I park at my neighbor's house across the street. And then I walk back up the long, winding driveway and I hear this like thunder split. And the oak tree fell right where I was sitting in my car, right as I walked past it. And it would have, worst case scenario, crushed me in my car while I was sitting there. Best case scenario, crushed my car where I just would have left it. And my car was safe on the other side. So I go into the house screaming, Dad, 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 an oak tree fell. I think my mom was on a business trip. She was like in Jamaica. So I run into my house and my dad's like, Taylor's probably like a branch. He comes out and he's like, oh my God, the tree fell. Then he gets a phone call that says at the same time, an oak tree fell on his office where he sits every day, like on his seat, a big oak tree that they knew was sick but was protected by the city, so they couldn't take down, crashed where my dad sits 5 out of 7 days of the week. His cars were blocked in, and my car was on the street, so I could drive us to his office. And so it was like so crazy and so shocking. And if you've never like seen a tree fall, it sounds like Zeus throwing a lightning bolt down from Olympus. It is the craziest noise. I didn't know what was happening. I was about 5 feet from it. Like I had walked 5 paces and it crashed right where I had been. And I don't know what would have happened if I did not listen to my intuition in that moment.
Wow, I remember when this happened. It's just so crazy and like simultaneously at the same time. Wow, such an example. And I love too that it happened before you were really developed. And I think that's a cool thing that goes back to what we were talking about of like you trusted it in that moment. And that has been part of the building blocks of you trusting it because that happened. And so that was like a piece of the puzzle for you to be like, wow. And was there any part of you that second guessed it in that moment, or you just were like, yeah, I'll move it?
It was just really interesting because I felt really calm in the moment. The way it came in, again, falls in alignment with all these examples I'm saying, like move your car to the street. It was just purposeful and solution oriented and present. And it's almost like a power bigger than me was taking me over in that moment, like directing my consciousness. Because usually I'd be like, no, 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 I'm just being silly, or I'd talk myself out of it. But it was just this weird moment where I was like, why am I doing this? But I just did it. It was hard to explain. And it's actually really interesting reading Gordon Higginson's memoir, On the Side of Angels. I've talked about it on the podcast a little bit. He has similar experiences when he was fighting in World War II, where it would all of a sudden be like, I need to go get a drink of water. And he'd like leave an area and then that area would get bombed. I just feel like if you're sensitive to those vibrational currents, they might be able to manipulate you a little bit more. I don't know what that is, but like in a way that saves lives. And I think that there's probably a lot of people listening to this podcast who have had experiences like that, where it's like, I just knew, or something bigger than me told me not to, or an earth angel intervened. Like that can happen too, where somebody's like, don't walk down that road. You know what I mean? So I think that the messages come to us in different ways, but it was almost this, and it was a long time ago, but I just remember being like mildly surprised at myself for listening, but just felt like I needed to.
Wow. Yeah, it's almost like before we have the knowing and the understanding, it comes in maybe in a fiercer way. And then once we have more agency over it, it allows us to have more agency over it because it knows that it can trust us to listen.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I don't want anybody to let paranoia happen because of these stories. This is it's easy to flip a switch into the side that's unhealed and anxious with this, but that's never how it comes in. It's not like me being like, this tree could fall and I could be crushed or a car could hit me, so I need to pull over. That's not how any of these messages have come in. It's like this grounded, For me, it's like a knowing because I don't have clairaudience as strongly. So it's not like I'm hearing a voice saying, move your car. It's like almost I know the sentence, move your car is like the best way I could say it. So I just want to stress that. There can also be people who go into full spiritual psychosis, and we need to stay grounded in like the present world, the physical world, the material world with this information too. We can't be looking for signs of danger in everything all the time, or signs that we're supported in everything all the time. Like sometimes we just have to be living our life, and that's the consciousness where, when sort of like when you're not looking for it, that's when it can come in sometimes. And that's like how, for me, intuitive information works. It's like you actually have to do less, not more. So I think like even with our self divination or even in client sessions, there's just this sense of, okay, I'm going to empty my mind and just trust what comes through. And so I think in our day to day life, if we're living in a way that's grounded and regulated, we're in the state where that can come through. And when it does, it will have a feeling that is not anxious or have an undercurrent of what if, what if, what if, what if.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to something we were saying at the top of it's an invitation to check in with your inner knowing. So maybe you're getting a fearful thing of, oh no, I shouldn't park over here. Oh no. And maybe we take that as, oh, is that my intuition giving me a message about it? And that's an invitation to get still and really listen. Is this a message from my intuition, or is this my like worried, frantic self clutching on to something and deciding it's my intuition? And that becomes a practice of every time we have those anxious thoughts, getting still and quiet and trying to really listen to the truth of them. And I think we get better and better at it when we do that.
Yeah. And I think if you're getting, like, for example, the parking garage story where it's like, don't park here today, because that's an example where the other two were telling me what to do. And then that one is like what not to do. And I think sometimes with the what not to do one, it can be like a little bit harder to trust because it's not telling you what to do. It's not like put your glasses on the table. It's not move your car to the street. It's don't park here. The what not to do can be a little bit more congruent with fear. It can be easier to mistake it with fear because it's not a answer or a solution. It's presenting something that isn't for the highest good. So in those case scenarios, it's like, what's the harm to just not park there? And then you can see, like, did anything happen? I don't know. It's okay to not overthink these things and be like, oh, part of my intuitive development journey is parsing out what is fear, what is not. So I'm just going to listen to this to give myself peace of mind. And then maybe it's actually just fear. And then I could learn something valuable from that information. Or maybe there is a bomb threat and I'm glad I didn't park there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. These things come through to us in so many different ways. Like for me personally, I can't think of a lot of examples that feel like those that you're talking about, where I just got a sentence that was like, do this or do that. But for me, it often is more about just this knowing about a situation or a person that isn't frantic fear based, but it's just, I know this isn't right. And I feel it. And I will try and ignore it or argue it away. And then here it is still, and I'll wish it away and argue it away. And it's still here. I don't get so much like words or phrases. It's like a indescribable, like, knowing of
Yeah. A yes or a no.
yeah, yeah. And that's been a cool thing to tune my body to. And again, trust in. It's like I can feel when something's a yes, and I can feel when something just doesn't quite feel right to me. And my brain wants to explain to me why it's fine. And it works very hard to do that. And it's been interesting to see how, even with my brain doing that, the feeling doesn't shift. And I think then that helps me to be like, but you still have this feeling about it. You couldn't talk yourself out of it, and other people couldn't talk you out of it. So I think there's something there that you can't deny that you're feeling, that is just, this is off, and you can sense that it's off. So that's been a big part of it for me, really noticing that.
That's such a helpful distinction because all of our stuff comes in differently. And I think also sometimes we're getting more intuitive information than we actually realize. If you went deeper into the yeses or the nos, there's probably more information in that moment of knowing than you're giving yourself credit for. Whereas for me, I might put it into a sentence, but that's from like years of practice, but it starts as that yes or no. That's already such a great sign of development, is that you're in tune with that yes or no. And then it's like, oh, but the why or the deeper layers or the hunches or what's like woven into that yes or no, there's more information there. I'm sure of it.
Yes, that's a great thing for me to explore. And even as you're saying it, I feel that that's true. Even as she was talking to me about it, I was like, oh, you already know that that's true. And there's already stuff I can think of right now that I'm like, right, like that and that was stuff you felt that was, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I'm doing this series, because it's very important. And I also want to use this series while we're on the topic to talk about my upcoming mentorship program, Becoming the Oracle. And that's a big part of it, is actually helping you guys understand how much more intuitive information you're getting. It's like the intro sentence is magic reveals itself for those who remember where to look for it. Intuition is the same. We're constantly getting intuitive information and we don't recognize probably 95% of it. And so that's like a big part of the mentorship, is to be like, no, no, no. There's so much more underneath the surface of what your perception of your intuition is. And I'm going to help you find it for yourself.
Yeah, oh, it's so exciting. I'm so excited for that to be happening. And I know so many of our listeners are, you've been writing in and letting us know. So it's a really cool chapter. And I would gander that the idea to do this mentorship came in as an intuitive hit for you.
Exactly. And that's the other thing too. It's like there are intuitive hits with business stuff and like nudges. And I've had situations where it's like, give this person a free reading. And I just don't question it. And I say yes. And then it's like they really needed that free reading. And then it's like that would be a reward in itself. But then it leads to 5 other opportunities in some way. They're always giving us information and things like that. And then our job as the oracle is to get curious and sit with the factors that try to talk us out of it or keep us in the choppy waters, and find our way to the depths that have the truth and the power and the magic, and then to actually recognize what intuition looks like when it comes through.
Yeah. And the cool thing about it, and I feel like we've really talked about this, it's like the more you practice it, the deeper it gets and the more you know it. And so it's literally a practice, and we have opportunities to practice it constantly. And I think being gentle with ourselves as we start out, of like, it's okay that I'm not sure. It's okay that I still feel vague about it and can't really pin it down. Let me have playful curiosity with it, like Taylor always says. Like, okay, I feel like I'm getting an intuitive hit about this thing. Let me follow it and see what happens. And then maybe afterwards, I'll be able to decipher, no, I think that was maybe just my anxious thoughts, or no, I think maybe that was it. Okay. And that felt this way. So next time I'll try and hone in on that. And probably before you know it, you'll look back. And that's what's been happening to me recently, truly, where I'm like, oh no, like I have deep intuition and I can trust it. And you don't have to keep second guessing it or arguing it away. Like, trust it, believe in it.
That makes me so happy, Claire, because I even feel like from the beginning of Magic Hour, you're like, I like kind of feel which cards are right, but I'm very open about it. And now you're just like, no, I feel I can trust my knowing. It's been so beautiful to witness that.
Oh, thank you. That means so much. And I hope that's inspiring for our listeners. It's like we're all on a journey with it. And you don't have to judge yourself for where you're at or compare yourself to Taylor, which I know is so easy to do, like comparing ourselves to other people and being like, why isn't it like that for me? But it's always been different for me than it is with Taylor. And the trap has been to be like, oh, I'm not as tapped in, but like, okay, whatever. I'm on my own journey. And my gifts are showing up in the way that they are supposed to for me. They don't need to show up the way Taylor's do. She's on her journey. She's living a life that's different and unique, and mine are different and unique as well. And that's correct.
Absolutely. And spirit works through all of us in different ways. For some of you guys, you might channel stories or scripts. For some of you guys, like your intuition comes out in a therapy session that you're helping heal people through. It's like we're all working on connecting in our own way. And that's by perfect design. And I think intuition is such an interesting topic, because with no other subject in the world would we expect to be experts without any education or training or practice, but because intuition is a soul function that is a birthright and that we all have, it's almost like we have this pressure where it's like, I'm either intuitive or I'm not. But like with any skill, it takes time and practice and being a beginner and learning what a yes is and what a no is and getting the hang of it and learning your unique language that you speak with your angels and guides. Like our souls all speak different languages, different accents, different ways of connection. And that's by design. And so I think it's really interesting. Like you wouldn't just expect to know French if you're not a native French speaker. Why is it different with intuition? And I'll tell you why. It's because of decades of witch wound and superstition and disconnection from the land. And like I always say, we cannot afford to be disconnected any longer. We also have deep intuitive knowing about what's right or wrong with our planet and the way that people are being treated and what's happening on a global scale. We cannot afford to be disconnected any longer.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think the witch wound is such a perfect example. It's like, I know that all of us who are unraveling that feel that is not the way that we are going to thrive is in that mindset, that we are being shut down by that mindset. That is an intuitive knowing. Feeling out of discord with this system is an intuitive knowing that there is more and that you're meant to expand, not be held down by these ideas.
Absolutely. And I think even you saying that's an intuitive knowing, it sparks in me the need to share the way we talk about our intuition is also really important. There's such a different way of communicating. Like, I got the intuitive knowing that we can no longer show up this way. That's powerful and in your intuition and claiming your knowing. Whereas instead, it's very different of being like, yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like the world, and I don't know, I might be wrong, but I feel like the world needs to show up a different way. There's such a different energy between those two things. The people that you're comparing yourself to, if you're comparing yourself to me, if you're comparing yourself to Claire, maybe we speak about our intuition in a way that makes it seem like it's something different than your experience, when in reality, it's just the way we're claiming it is different.
Yes, I love that. I love that so much. What a bold move to claim something, not apologize for it anymore, not make excuses for it, which I've spent a lifetime doing in so many different ways. I'm not really sure. Maybe I'm wrong. I say that all the time. Qualify it. But yeah, to claim it, to claim magic as our birthright, which is something Taylor talks about all the time, to claim your intuitive knowing.
Yes, exactly. Like when I am talking about intuition, I'm like, I got the message this. I don't over explain it. I don't apologize for it. I'm like, this is what I got. And I think that that already in people who are on their journey be like intimidating. Oh, well, I don't know. But the more you're in this practice of claiming your knowing, taking your knowing and putting it out into the physical world and saying consequences be damned, that's building the trust. It's building the trust with yourself enough to say it. That's even like the first step, like not apologizing for it, discounting it. And if you're wrong, okay, you learn something. Be like, oh, I guess that wasn't my intuition, it was fear. I'm on a journey right now and I'm learning. So it's like there's no wrong answers. But I think that's the last thing I want to leave you guys with before we go into part two is like, how are you speaking about your intuition and how are you delivering your knowing? Because that's part of the unhealed relationship that needs some love, because that's where like the momentum gets going. Over my decade of doing this work, I started in that way. Take what resonates with you, leave the rest, always setting the stage. And it's like, I still say that, but in a different way now. It's like the energy of that is more for your peace of mind, whereas before it was for my peace of mind. I don't want to be wrong and I don't want to give you guys something that isn't helpful, but it's like, I trust you guys enough to take what resonates with you and leave the rest. But some people can be really superstitious. So I give that disclaimer just as a permission slip for them if they needed that. And so I think just noticing where we are discounting, over explaining, and dimming our light in this space. Because would we do the same thing with our truth? Imagine speaking your truth to someone and being like, I could be wrong about my truth, but this is just what I feel like maybe I should say. And if it doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. But this is what my truth is. It's like, okay, that's a different tone than, hey, this is my truth. And I think as we strengthen our intuitive muscle, it has a lot of parallels between strengthening our throat chakra and our truth muscle, and the two are very connected. So as we strengthen our ability to speak up for ourselves and speak our truth, we strengthen the pathway for us to speak differently about claiming our intuitive knowing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this has been full of so much magic. I think it's going to be one of the ones that you guys tell me you listen to a couple times because there's a lot to take in. And we'll definitely do a part 2. And if you're interested in my mentorship, Becoming the Oracle, I'm going to keep giving information about it as the summer goes on. It will officially launch in the fall, is my plan. And if you're interested, you can email scheduling@angelsandamethyst.com or contact@magichourpod.com. And I will put you on the list of people who are interested. I'm only going to take 8 mentees at a time. It's going to be an intimate container, but I'll run the container more than once. So, part of this mentorship program as well, the Be Your Own Angelic Intuitive Workshop and the Healing the Witch Wound Workshop are prerequisites for this. I'm not going to go backwards into that information because there's so much more to share in this container to prepare you to become the oracle. So if you're interested in taking those workshops and you're also interested in becoming a mentee, do not wait because that's going to prepare you. And if you're wondering which order to go in, trust your intuition, but Be Your Own Angelic Intuitive is a great one to start with because then you can be more in the practice of the tools of that workshop. And Becoming the Oracle is really for all levels, but with those 2 workshops under your belt and practicing some of the exercises in the Be Your Own Angelic Intuitive workshop, it's getting you to more of an intermediate level, which is perfect for this container.
Oh, it's also exciting.
I know. And you can find the workshops at angelsandamethyst.com, and code 333 gives $33 off. And feel free to write in with any questions about those things.
Amazing.
So let's transition to sitting with spirit. Hi, my loves. Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit. This is the section of the podcast where we sit with our angels, our guides, our loved ones in the spirit world, and give the messages for the collective. So, I just want to say a little bit of a disclaimer before we get into Sitting with Spirit, which I think I've said this on the podcast before, but Magic Hour podcast is not recorded the week before it comes out. So sometimes Claire and I record things months in advance, even. And so when things are happening around the world, the podcast isn't always synced up with them. So I just want to say that because we're obviously at time of recording, it's just a heartbreaking time on planet Earth. And it has been. There's been so much suffering. And I think one of the positive sides of social media is that we see it in a way that we didn't before. And a message that my guides gave me a while back is that social media is the major difference between like World War I, World War II, and where we are now. We have social media, and it's interesting because Pluto in Aquarius is sort of exploring the shadow side of social media, but there's also a lot of gifts in social media too. And so the first thing that I just want to say is that we can't be so easily propagandized to just hate blindly in ways that we used to be able to before social media. We see that there are innocent people who their governments do not reflect them all around the world who just want basic dignity, survival, family, love, and freedom. And we are more alike than we are different. And I truly believe there is more good in this world than hate and evil. And I have just been sitting with the state of the world. It's very intense to be an empath, but of course, I'm so privileged to not be in an actual war zone. But just holding the pain of the world, it's so, so heavy and it's so, so much. And we can't let darkness win, both inside of us on the individual and outside. And, I don't like to necessarily simplify it down to darkness and light as good and bad because I think there are harmful connotations in that. But I'm not really sure what other language to use other than just maybe love or fear, good or bad, whatever it is. But I think you guys know what I'm trying to say because darkness and shadow can actually be very healing and powerful. And sometimes light is too much and too bright. There's no one or other with those 2 words. So just follow me with where I'm going here. I first of all just want to say I do not support war, murder, and violence in any form, point blank, period. I do not believe it's us versus them or this side versus that side. I think it's innocent people everywhere around the world that do not deserve that. And it can be so exhausting living in this time period where we are learning Pluto and Aquarius's lessons. And I want to go into a little layer of an observation that has been coming up for me around this. And nothing, like I said, can be simplified into this neat little box and put into a bow. But I just want to call out some energetics that I've been seeing. So we know, and we've talked about how Pluto in Aquarius is going to show us the shadow sides of technology and social media. And I think that part of where we are going right now is us outsourcing our community and our genius to social media. It's very interesting, and not just social media, but technology like ChatGPT as well. And it's very interesting because as Pluto in Aquarius progresses, Aquarius rules friendships and community. And we see how we go immediately to social media for our humanitarianism. And Pluto in Aquarius is showing us how that isn't quite working. So there's a positive side to this, which is spreading awareness, connecting with people, organizing things. Like, I'm not saying don't talk about what's going wrong in the world on social media. Do that, especially if it's from a place of feeling energized and solution oriented and sharing places to donate or action steps or bringing awareness to things that nobody is talking about or whatever it is. If you feel called to do that, that's very powerful. But I also think there's a shadow side of this that Pluto and Aquarius is highlighting, where somehow we think that sharing on social media is moving the needle in a way that I just don't think it is. It's not the full picture of activism just on social media. And I also think that it's showing us the shadow side of only being a keyboard warrior, but not trying to be of the light or the goodness or the love in any other area of life outside of that, or actually making constructive changes in the real world or helping your actual community or people around you. And so I just feel like social media and the online world is such an illusion. It gives us this illusion of community. It gives us the illusion of connection. It gives us the illusion of humanitarianism. But somebody said this where it's like we've been posting about these things for years and years and years. It's not like it's getting better, but I think it is important to be informed. So it's kind of like a little bit of a fine line there. And so the other side of Pluto and Aquarius that I want to talk about is ChatGPT and these AI services that are sort of inhibiting us from needing to think for ourselves a little bit. And there's new information coming out. By the way, I don't say any of this with judgment. Everything that I'm talking about of the shadow side of Pluto and Aquarius is just an observation, things I've been noticing. And whenever I say anything on the podcast, it's not from a place of judgment. It's always just from a place of playful curiosity, getting curious about these things, seeing where they land in your heart. And if they don't resonate, don't take them. So with ChatGPT and things, new studies are coming out that say that basically it's inhibiting our brain function and it's inhibiting neuroplasticity and all of these things. And I feel like with Pluto in Aquarius, developing our own intuition and feeling our feelings is more important than ever. Developing our own intuition cannot happen without feeling our feelings. And I feel like right now is this time where it's so important to not outsource our wisdom, to not believe in the illusion of all of these shadow sides of Aquarius, of technology trying to sort of replace our community, our genius, our humanitarianism, our service. And so it's very interesting how through these times the volume is turned up so loudly. And I wrote down this quote of when you're connected to your soul, there's no need for ChatGPT. It's like all of the answers are within us and we can't lose connection to that. And I know that ChatGPT might have some functions or be useful in some ways, but we cannot outsource our own intuition to ChatGPT, our own brand of service and community to social media. We have to remember to bring things back into the real physical world. the intuition of our body and the real physical service to the people, community, and places around us in the real physical world as well. And so this has just been really highlighted for me, and I wanted to speak about it. And in that vein, there's this energetic pattern that I've noticed where if you don't talk about things on social media, people say that means you don't care. It's that if then thinking, if this, then this, which is all based in projection. And I think that this is a very dangerous narrative because this is not contributing to love. Being online with pitchforks, trying to condemn people that aren't doing enough in your mind or aren't doing the right things. Like, you never know what people's life is, what their circumstances are, what they're going through, or how they're connected to these topics in the real world. And so I think that there's also this energy of kind of us being in these very traumatic, violent systems and us on a deep level feeling so out of control within this. So we try to punish and control other people's responses to it because we can't control the system at large. And again, I can't just wrap this big pattern I'm seeing in like one neat bow. I'm sure there's a lot of layers and facets to it, but it almost gives this feeling of like when you're being bullied by a parent at home and then a kid goes to school and he bullies the other kids. And like on social media, there's just this feeling of mob mentality that's very chaotic and punishing and shame inducing. And it's giving turning on innocent people instead of fixing the actual problem in the real world or making the world a more loving place. And I understand that we all have so much anger, so much frustration, and for good reason. But I don't think it serves anyone to try to shame and bully and hurt in this matrix web of social media that isn't even real life. I think, if anything, having these difficult conversations with family members or friends or people in our immediate community would be more useful than just debating a stranger on the internet. And so we're in this time where we really need to, especially as strong empaths in this community, get in touch with our heart, get in touch with what matters to us, and see the ways that we can sort of plug up the energy leaks. This time is full of energy leaks. It's so easy to just get paralyzed in fear and shame, in judgment, in hatred. And those things are messengers that are very important to get the message from and to learn from and to see, like, as Megan Watterson said in the interview coming out in a couple weeks, rage is a holy emotion that shows that love's boundary has been crossed. And I very much agree with that. And there's information in that. But then moving forward in a way that's not leaking our energy out from a wounded place, but in a purposeful, direct, clear, solution oriented way that's not just throwing complaints or shame or pitchforks at other people on the internet. So I think that if you catch yourself feeling that way, like you want to call someone out or you want to shame someone for not talking about things or not bringing up things the way you think they should be brought up, I think sit with where that anger is living in your body. And oftentimes, if it's hysterical, it's historical, as I've learned. And these big external triggers with the times that we're living through politically feel so chaotic that when we have big visceral reactions to them, on one layer, it's because we can't stand injustice. And on the second layer, it's because it's triggering a wound with a similar energetic signature inside of us. And that was happening to me so much when the election happened and the inauguration happened. I was like losing my shit. I know so many of us woke up at 3 a.m. just like in a cold sweat. And I was one of those people. And so this is inviting us to such a deep layer of personal healing so that we don't leak our energy and that we can be mobilized as agents of love that the world needs more of now. It's kind of like what I was saying in this other episode. I forget which one it was, about how this woman was kind of being violent with my aunt a little bit and trying to start a fight. And my aunt said she needs more love, not less. When you see people in the world who feel like you want to shame or condemn or judge, just realize they need more love, not less. We need more love, not less. The world needs more love, not less. And so everything with Pluto and Aquarius feels like it's pushing us to not feel our feelings, to outsource our intuition, to outsource our genius, to be in this social media false web of community. And we need to come back to more love with our body, with our family, with our friends, with our immediate community, not less. And it feels like so tempting to just isolate ourselves in these little shells. And that is not the answer for these times. And I know it's been so devastating on so many levels to see what's happening in the world. And we all just need more, more, more love. And it's up to us. Nobody's going to come save us. We have to be, as again, I say in the future episode with Megan Watterson, we talk about how in her book, she talks about no one's coming to save us. We have to be the version of self that will save us. And that is what everything I'm saying is designed for us to come into the version of self that will save the world, that will band together. And that is not on any one person or any one community. But imagine if every single person around the world was doing this healing work and engaged in more love, not less. It would be a lot harder for forces of hate and fear and greed to take over. So that felt very important to share. And it's interesting because as I was tuning into the energy this week, I saw the symbol of the third eye, and instead of a regular pupil, it was a sun. And that's what I felt like. There was this image here of truth and shining the light on things and creating new energetic strategies based off of intuitive hits on how you can be a light in this world, how you can share your light, how we can shine light together more brightly. And with that being said, I'm not sure if I've spoken about this on the podcast before, that I think a lot of the root of the wounds in this world can be traced back to unhealed Gemini Sagittarius energy, where we lost our curiosity. And it's like the earth doesn't care if it's called California or Canada or Mexico. It's like that's not Earth's problem. It's all these human stories that we're projecting onto the land and each other that create separation, that are only rooted in these historical events that this generation of people alive on earth right now didn't even create in the first place. And so I was just getting this feeling of like, we live in an imbalanced Sagittarius world. Sagittarius is the ruler of religion, philosophy, truth, wisdom. And on the shadow side, superstition, cult consciousness, guru consciousness. And I feel like, patriarchy has kind of co opted these religions and is living in this violent, greedy, destructive way that's all climaxing right now, that is not sustainable for very much longer. And that to me is imbalanced Sagittarius energy, where it's like, we're right. This is the truth. Nothing's ever going to change our religion or the highway. And if you come back to the zodiac wheel, the first six signs are the recipe to healthy embodiment for the second six. And so we need to lean more into Gemini energy to come back to healthy Sagittarius. We need to connect with people with other points of view and really get curious, connect with each other, learn from each other, and start to expand our knowledge of how things work around the world instead of feeling like our truth is the only truth. When we get to this place where it's just an echo chamber and this algorithm of life that's only reinforcing back our preconceived notions and our worldview, that's where it gets so easy to be like us versus them, me versus you, and this sort of tribalism instinct kicks in. And so it's so important. And this kind of ties back to what I was saying about ChatGPT and not outsourcing our intuition and staying in community. It's like, as a global collective, we need to learn more. We cannot think we know it all. We don't know it all. We can never know it all. It's impossible. And in fact, the moment we think we know it all is the moment there's no chance for world peace. And so we have to start getting curious, wanting to learn from other people's points of views, and finding ways to connect outside of these stories and religions and narratives that have tried to keep us separate for too long. And so going into the energy for this week in particular, which I feel like everything I'm saying must tie in somehow, there's a theme here of inconvenient truth. And I'm not just talking about the macro scale, also on the micro of like, Where is that deep truth that you've been running from? Where is it time to just face the quote unquote demons and shine your light of your third eye as the sun and just put it directly on the truth that you've been avoiding or feels too painful to really look at? And so the energetic strategy this week really feels tied to staying present. It's going to feel so tempting to just run down the hill and think about the future and sort of always be wondering 10 steps ahead and wanting to have it all figured out and know what's going to happen. And we need to stay present with radical honesty and just do the best with the little things that are in our control. So much is out of our control, but we have more in our control than we realize. And doing the best with that and staying present with that feels very, very important. And through this time period, I also feel like there's a lot of information about ourselves to be gleaned about what are our coping mechanisms? How do we self soothe? Because I feel like there's also a layer of ancestral healing and cycle breaking in this time where it's kind of like, this is what my ancestors would have done to feel safe, or this is how they maybe would have ran from their feelings or not wanted to face their radical, honest truth or inconvenient truths. And we're really seeing like, does this coping mechanism work for me really? Or am I ready to do something that is maybe a little more authentic or brave? With that being said, I know there's a lot of fear and worry in the collective, and that's leading to a lot of paralysis. And I just feel like take care of yourself, give yourself what you need, and stay as present as possible. I also felt like the timing of things might feel slow or heavy or like they're dragging their feet or like you're ready for things to go faster. But just in each present moment of however the pacing and the timing is going, meet yourself there. Give yourself permission to fully meet yourself in the gift of however the energy is going, whether it's a season of rest or a season of reaping rewards or a season of hard work. Just meet yourself wherever the river of life is taking you and give yourself permission to do that because the timing will all work out in the way it's meant to. It always does. And then I also felt like with this theme of inconvenient truth or facing inconvenient truths, I saw my symbol for home and family. And I just felt like there might be some family dynamics or working through things with family or shadows that have been inherited ancestrally. So it just feels like a deep energy week. It feels like a lot of people might be scared or overwhelmed. And I just get this feeling of, again, stay present, take care of yourself, keep tapping into your intuition. And when it feels so tempting because you feel so disconnected to get on social media and, leak your energy and burn yourself out, remember there is a web of complete, beautiful love information available to you through your heart and your intuition. And you don't need to go anywhere. In fact, you can disconnect to reconnect, as they say, and that might be more helpful for you than seeing the same news stories over and over and over again. So I want to go into the mediumship now. This is going to be sort of a quicker connection. This was not a man of many words, but I connected with a male in the spirit world and I was seeing a whistle. And I got the feeling that he would have been either like a sports ref or worked in the sports industry in some way. I felt this kind of like machismo with him. Like I got this feeling that he might have been always kind of like spitting game or like a ladies' man or kind of just always wanted to be seen in a certain light and wouldn't really take off that mask. I did feel like he could also be really warm and fun to be around as well. I also saw that he had like a short black ponytail and he wore tinted glasses and that he kind of just did things his own way, marched to the beat of his own drum. He just felt kind of like a guy's guy to me. I don't think he really was around that much feminine energy. And so his message was, while I was here, I was always chasing lower chakra needs, whether that's money or sex or whatever those survival needs are, or very like animalistic needs. I was always chasing that. And he was kind of saying that's not the way to live, but also the polar opposite isn't the way to live, because he was making me feel like I was on one end of the spectrum and then there's another end of the spectrum, which is like always worrying about what other people's needs are and losing sight of your basic human animal needs and always wanting to be in your head, thinking and controlling and, helping other people is a great thing, but there's another way of losing yourself in that is also not exactly right. And he was talking about needing to find the balance. Like, if you feel the pendulum has swung too much to one area, needing to find balance, because either extreme is ignoring your soul. Being lost in your relationships and worries and in your heads and other people's needs has lost connection with what your soul is telling you. And being selfish and self absorbed and only chasing material comforts is ignoring what your soul is telling you. And so the soul will always be the balance keeper. It will always help you come back to equilibrium and your perfect timing. And so there is just this feeling too of like, what do you need? What side of the pendulum are you on? Where can you come back to the middle? And where can you not be chasing the body's needs or the mind's needs? Where can you really connect with what your soul is asking for you? And that kind of circles back to everything I've been saying about facing the inconvenient truths, about not outsourcing your intuition and looking for signs outside or going on ChatGPT or on social media, but sort of going on that deep, 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 deep quest of truth within your heart and really feeling all the feelings and knowing that that is always where the answers lie, is right inside of your heart. And sometimes it can feel very scary or daunting to do that deep excavation work, but that is what keeps us connected to our superpower, connected to our humanity, and able to maintain the light through these times. So I'm sending you all so much love and have a beautiful rest of your week.
For more information on Taylor and her work, go to angelsandamethyst.com or connect with her on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. She is the one verified account with this name and will never DM you for a reading. If you have any questions about intuition, spirituality, angels, or anything and everything magical, please email contact@magichourpod.com. We will answer listener questions once a month in our solo episodes. Are you an aligned business owner that would like to advertise to our beautiful hummingbird community? Please email contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss the magic. And don't forget to leave us 5 sparkling star reviews. They help more magical people find the pod. Please screenshot and email your 5-star reviews to contact@magichourpod.com, and we'll send you a free downloadable angelic meditation and enter you to win an angel reading with Taylor Page. If you review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, we'll add your name twice. And if you share the podcast on your Instagram story and tag us, we'll add your name a 3rd time. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 222 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Thank you for listening to Magic Hour with Taylor Page.